If the pandemic has taught us anything, if we've learned something from these crises and history, it's that nothing is certain. Not health, not finances, certainly not the future. And perhaps that can explain the recent demand, at least in my office, for prenuptial agreements. I've had this huge spike in inquiry as to these documents. And while I think most of us understand what a prenuptial agreement is, there's a lot of misconceptions concerning the law and whether they're even necessary. First misconception is you get married in the state of New York and everything at the time of divorce is divided equally. That is not the law in the state of New York. In fact, any assets that you acquire prior to the marriage is separate property and will remain separate property in the event of a divorce if you keep it separate, if you don't commingle it. And that's one big if. And so add to that the fact that although the asset itself can remain separate, the income that it throws off, the interest that it bills, and the appreciation in the value of that asset is automatically marital. And so there is where the prenuptial agreement is useful. It can deal with all of these issues. It can address the assets, it can label them separate or marital, and it could even cover the fact that if you commingle them, they will remain separate. An important document to have for that reason. The second misconception is income. I think people think that income acquired from their job or from these separate assets is automatically separate property. It is not. Any income earned during the marriage, whether it's from your job or your investments, any at all, is marital property. And that's an important issue to deal with. And a prenuptial agreement can also deal with this fact and how it is to be dealt with at the time of divorce. There are three separate items that are inherently separate. Personal injury awards, inheritances, and gifts. Gifts from a third party, not gifts from your spouse. These items are separate property whether they're obtained prior to or even after the marriage. The running joke in the matrimonial world is that a gift from your spouse is marital property and has to be divided. But the gift that you get from your boyfriend or girlfriend, even if you're married, is your separate property. But again, the same problem. If you commingle them, they will be dealt with as marital property. The prenuptial agreement is very good at addressing those issues. Maintenance, alimony, what formerly was known as alimony. Typically in the state of New York, with the recent case law and statute, I'm oversimplifying, but it's basically 1 year of maintenance for 3 years of marriage. That can be problematic. A prenuptial agreement can deal with it. It can either waive it. You can become very creative here in having a sliding scale or even a sunset provision that after a certain period of time, there is no maintenance or there's more maintenance. This is an important factor to have. This takes away a lot of the concerns parties have if one is earning a lot more in income than the other spouse. And finally, the last misconception, that prenuptial agreements only deal with divorce. That is not the case. They can also address death. In the state of New York, a married spouse, is automatically entitled to a certain percentage of the other spouse's estate, irrespective of what they put in a will, typically a third. Prenuptial agreement can deal with that. You can either have a waiver of that, you become more creative and have certain parts of it passed to the spouse. And one really important factor is that you can later make a will, which deals with the fact that you want to pass assets to your spouse without ever touching that prenuptial agreement in the event of a divorce. So, if it is signed and notarized in the right way, if there's a list of assets so that a party really knows what they're waiving, and if there's plenty of time before the marriage and time to review it with an attorney and review the matter, it is a valid agreement. It is a useful and important tool that can address and alleviate the party's concern. Whether it is absolutely necessary is on a case-by-case basis, but it certainly merits consideration for anyone contemplating marriage.